Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, I have another Dungeons & Dragons video. And this video actually has to do with a recent video that I had done talking about prestige classes, and it was more or less along the lines of ideas I had for an idea I had for prestige classes to kind of make them a bit more story based. Get your players more involved in the development and skill learning and etc. of the said prestige class that they take. And it seemed like there was some major misconceptions about what a prestige class is. And I think the misunderstanding is mostly related to the fifth edition players because, yes, from what I can tell, seeing from comments and etc., that prestige classes are no longer a thing in fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons. My understanding, it looks like they kind of end it with fourth. Um, Now there are those that did comment on the video and watch the video that seemed like they knew what prestige classes were. So, that is what it is, and it just kind of shows the difference between older edition players and newer edition players. And I don't want to necessarily say the advancedness like it's a bad thing, but yes, the advancedness of older editions of Dungeons and Dragons because they made it seem like subclasses took over. The thing is looking at it, no, subclasses didn't take over, and I'll get into why here as I go on through the video. So the thing to start with is what is prestige classes, and I gave a very, very generalized description and very short description in my previous video. So in this one, I'm going to go a little bit more expansive of what is a prestige class. A prestige class is a separate class that is a more advanced class than the base classes. Now, one description I gave, I said about, oh, the druid has a version called the Wild Shaper, or maybe it's just called Shaper, that's basically cranks the wild shaping ability of the druid up to 11, and people were like, oh, it's this. I'm like, well, yes and no. Um, the thing to understand with the prestige class versus subclasses, because I've seen a lot of people making references to subclasses, is no, these are not subclasses. So with D&D 5th edition, subclasses are built into the character class. So if you're a fighter, once you achieve a certain level, you can become an Eldri Knight. I guess there's a couple prestige or a couple subclasses you can choose for each class, but the subclasses are married to the classes and they're a requirement. That's where prestige classes are completely different from subclasses because prestige classes is their own class that has a certain set of requirements before you can take that class. And most of the time, you're going to have to plan ahead and build your character around taking that prestige class because of the set requirements related to the class. And sometimes when you're thinking about this, you need to think about that at the very first die roll you make when making your character. Because such certain prestige classes, such as the Dwarven Defender, a requirement is you have to be the race of a dwarf. Now, the next thing is while prestige classes are usually geared towards a certain type of class, that's not necessarily required. A good example is the Dualist, which I'll show here in a little bit. The Dualist in, well, even in 5th edition, the Dualist in 5th edition now, from my understand, is actually a fighter subclass. Thing to understand is with D&D 3.5 is the Dualist was a prestige class that was geared towards the fighter. However, actually, the Rogue married up to the prestige class of Dualist very well because the Dualist was an unarmored, essentially an unarmored fighter. A lot of their bonuses were geared to either wearing little or no armor and things of that nature, and it kind of made like this really cool hybrid, rogue, high end fighter type of deal. Maybe not elite fighter, but more towards to being an elite fighter. You also had things like the gladiator. Well, the gladiator with the right feats and etc., could have been a ranger to start, even though the gladiator is more married towards the fighter. The exotic weapons master is actually a prestige class that was more geared towards the barbarian. But, and the only reason I know this is because it's in the Tomb of Blood guide, or sorry, that's not Tomb of Blood, Tomb of Blood. That is from Masters of the Wild. But that class actually married really well to the fighter and the ranger based on how the fighter and the ranger built their characters, essentially, their classes. So let's dive in a little deeper because here's actually another one that people are going to find interesting is the Eldri Knight. The Eldri Knight is actually still around for 5th edition, and actually it is a subclass for the fighter. However, back in the 3.5 days, the Eldri Knight was actually a character class more built towards the wizard because to take Eldri Knight, spell casting was a requirement, as you can see here. Now, this is just a screenshot from the D&D 3.5 SRD website, so you can kind of see that it's actually got its own chart with attack bonuses, its different types of saves, and what its bonuses are related to the class. But if you see, you can see that there is a list of requirements necessary for the Eldri Knight to become a uh, to become an Eldri Knight. And usually the best way to go about this is to start off as a wizard, gain a couple levels as wizard, essentially get your casting ability up to level 3, then multi-class into fighter so you can get your proficiency with all martial weapons, and then at that point you gain a fighter as a level, and then you gain a level as a fighter, and then you become an Eldri Knight at that point, and then you just focus on being an Eldri Knight. It actually works out pretty good. There's other ways you could do it too, but that was one of the best ones I found to do it, which meant I had to take a multi-class a few different times. Another one, as I said a bit ago, is the Dualist. It's now a subclass for the fighter, but the Dualist was a prestige class that anyone could take. And that's the thing about this is anyone can take these prestige classes. Even a wizard could become a duelist. And actually, it would probably actually work out pretty well for a wizard. Of course, there's some of the length of time it may take, like you might end up, while you could become a duelist as a level 6 fighter or maybe a level 7 rogue or a level 8 rogue, you might end up being like a level 10 or a level 12 wizard before you can pick up a duelist class. But the thing is anyone could become any prestige class, and that's the core thing. Anyone could become any prestige class as long as they fulfilled the requirements. And then from there on, the prestige class was treated as a separate class. And then it goes under multi-classing, which I have the rules here for multi-classing and how everything is completely different for multi-classing. So while subclasses are married to classes currently in 5th edition, this was not a married type of thing. It leaned towards certain classes, and certain prestige classes couldn't be taken without having certain classes because of the way the class traits work and etc. So not every class could achieve every prestige class because of certain requirements, but essentially there was a wide brush, a wide base, if you will, of prestige classes that essentially anyone could take, as long as they had like the racial or the stat bonuses or whatever that was required for the prestige class. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize here is you had to also fulfill requirements. It wasn't just something given to you. It wasn't just something you took because you had to. It was you choose to do it. Now, there's a lot of different types of prestige classes. A great one is, do you want to play, are you a paladin and you want to become a knight templar? Well, there actually was a templar prestige class. Do you want to be a badass dwarf fighter that rides a boar into battle? Yeah, that's called the cavalier. You see, and you could probably do this with a dwarven defender as well, but that would technically be the cavalier. The cavalier would specialize in mounted combat. So there's also a lot of creativity there as well that kind of comes into this. Do you want to play Gandalf the Grey? Well, yeah, that's called Mage of the Arcane Order. You go as a wizard or you go as a sorcerer. I prefer wizard myself because of how the differences in how spells and that was done between the two classes. And I just found wizard to be the superior wizardry arcane spellcaster, in my opinion. And yeah, then you cross class into Mage of the Arcane Order. That's kind of what this is. What this is. It specializes you even further into a certain field. Now, in Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, which, from my understanding, still exists in 5th, but I do want to touch base on variant classes. And for anyone who's not aware, but I want to assume that yes, it's still there. I really only slightly touched base on variant classes, and these are kind of subclasses, if you will, for D&D 3.5. They kind of lean more heavily towards subclasses, or what would be considered subclasses now, which is variant classes. And essentially, these are core classes that has slight differences made to the classes. And like a good one is the bear totem barbarian. Of course, there's multiple animal totems of barbarians. There's eagle, there's bear. I think there was snake. There's tiger, etc., etc. But like the bear totem, it would have certain changes. Like, okay, you don't get this at level 5. Instead, you get this. You don't get this at level 1. Instead, you take this. So on and so forth. So like I think with like the bear totem, I think I lose if I remember correctly. And understand, I'm not 100% sure about this. I think it was with the bear totem, I lose tireless rage, but you gain and I think you also lose fast movement, but then you gain a damage reduction every couple cell levels, starting with like a DR1, and it's a natural damage reduction. So you'll have a DR1, and then like by like level 5, you'll be DR2, and then basically by level 20, it's like a DR4, I think it was. And understand, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I don't exactly know for sure, but the exact thing the thing is it's it just swaps out a couple little features from its core class that it's married to and changes it. And then this is something that's also decided at level 1 as you're doing your character creation that, well, hey, I want to be a different type of I want to be a barbarian, but I want to be a different type of barbarian. I want to make some, have little changes and lean towards this different type. And there was multiple different ones. Another one was the urban ranger. Oh, well, we're doing an urban setting and the ranger's not so good, but I'd really, really like to play the ranger. Well, the urban ranger would fit the bill. And then once again, the urban ranger would have a couple different types. It would basically take the core class ranger and just swap out a couple things to make a different variant of ranger. Another one too is the savage bard. The savage bard, think of a more combat oriented bard versus, your bard that can sing and talk his way out of different things and cast spells. It's, well, I lose. I'm trading this to become a better martial fighter. So better sword fighter or whatever, as well as they swap out a couple spells for more combat oriented spells, stuff of that nature. And what it really led to is it honestly, I don't know why they got rid of prestige classes, because honestly, in my opinion, it definitely leads to a lot more creativity because it's a multi class system. I can make the classes how I want to be. If I want to be, say the greatest duelist in whatever Game of Thrones, we'll just say Westeros. I want to be the greatest duelist in Westeros, but I'm a rogue. Okay, that's fine. I just got to take this, this, and this, and I can become a duelist. Um, but I want to be a Knight Templar, but I'm a fighter. Well, you can't take the Templar class as a fighter, but then you can take actually a fighter version called Knight Defender, and those guys can become knights. And actually, that's the even technically even a rogue in its context. Even the rogue can become a knight with the Knight Defender class being there. So that's something to kind of think about as well. Is that by taking away prestige classes, it actually takes away a lot of different options that Dungeons and Dragons used to have, and a lot of creativity that it used to have. And honestly, for me, Dungeons and Dragons, that's why you play Dungeons and Dragons. You want to make your world feel lived in. You want to have a lot of creativity, things of that nature. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap today's video up at that. Hopefully, I was able to emphasize and kind of give that better idea of what prestige classes are for people who didn't know what prestige classes are. Because honestly, I really don't know if it's going to be coming with the new edition. I kind of suspect that prestige classes is something that's kind of gone to the wayside and will probably never return, or maybe further down the road. But I will just leave this at that, and hopefully everyone has a better understanding. But understand, I do read the comments down below, and I will take time to answer any questions, or to maybe kind of refine anything that you don't understand. So please be willing to leave a comment down below, your thoughts and whatever. But yeah, so I'm going to leave this at that. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and have yourself a wonderful day.